There it is. Feel it. Hold this moment. This is the spirit of prayer. With full hearts, we gather this evening. Together, let us recognize and honor this last night in the mystery and holiness, with love and creativity. God, by whatever name, in whatever form we can collectively imagine, be here to bless this body. As we celebrate our time together, grant us hope, strengthen us, and let us have fun. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated.
Good evening. To the WPI Class of 2019, President Leshin, trustees, faculty, staff, alumni, family members, and friends. We offer this evening's ceremony as a celebration of all who dedicate themselves to learning and personal growth. And on behalf of the Class of 2019 Baccalaureate Committee, we welcome you. The baccalaureate tradition at WPI is planned by members of the senior class. This rite of passage allows our graduating class to pause and reflect on their WPI experience. This evening program provides an opportunity for our class to remember both the challenges and the tremendous growth they have experienced over the past 4 years. We will hear stories from the students of the graduating class, be gifted with words of inspiration from our special guest speaker, John McNeil, and enjoy music performed by a number of talented members of the class of 2019. Please enjoy the program.
Soon-to-be alumni of WPI, take note. You'll forget 90% of what you learned here within 6 months of your graduation. Now, that didn't come from a peer-reviewed study, but rather my first-year research advisor. He wasn't saying we were about to waste the next 4 years of our lives. He was simply stating a fact, as scandalous as it seemed at the time. But if you think about it more critically, he might be right. I think many of my fellow classmates might agree that by the end of our first year here at WPI, we had learned more than the previous 18 years of our lives. But now, on the eve of our graduation, I've already forgotten so many details. Who honestly remembers here and now how to calculate the curl of a vector field, or how to implement an LRU cache with O1 lookup and insertion time? In fact, when I read through my academic transcript, I realize there are entire classes I've forgotten. Names, faces, syllabi, all a blur. Contemplating this fact, along with my outstanding student loan balance, I faced the sobering question: what has made it all worth it? If it's not the facts and the figures and the formulas we struggle to acquire, what has somehow prepared many of us to head to the Silicon Valleys, Wall Streets, university campuses, and startups in our future? Maybe it isn't so much what we learned, but how we've learned to learn. Suddenly, clear, detailed flashes of learning to learn filled my memory. Those were the unforgettable things, the take it with you when you go kind of things, the lessons you could see repeating to your own children someday. I learned the first lesson in the beginning of my first year at WPI. It was a familiar scene, a gray Worcester winter night in the office of Professor Traver, our professor for the Great Problem Seminar. We were fresh-faced first-year students, all there for one unified purpose: to figure out who in our group was wrong. And it certainly wasn't me. Your average WPI student is used to carrying a heavy load. For those group projects in high school, we were the whole group. We were the people everyone wanted on their team. and no one complained, especially around grading time. But that didn't work as well once all of us leaders were forced to work together on the same team. We all wanted the reins, and none of us wanted to listen. So there we were, crowded into our professor's office in Salisbury, each of us secretly waiting to be vindicated. We were jousting, explaining, and sometimes almost shouting. As I was about to reply to one of my teammates, our professor stopped me and said, "First, tell me what she just said." I stopped. I had a reply ready to go, but could barely recall what she actually just said. I sputtered something out, and she replied, "That's not what I just said." For the rest of the meeting and the rest of the term, our professor made us first repeat what we thought the other person said before replying. That was the day I learned a critical step in learning how to learn: listening. In the words of professor and celebrated author Stephen Covey, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. We've made it through GPS, interactive qualifying projects, major qualifying projects, software engineering, fluids, robotics engineering 1001, and countless other classes. We've lived in tiny residence hall rooms packed with 3 or 4 people and apartments with just 1 bathroom. We made it through because we learned. We learned to listen in order to learn. Listening, though, requires humility. And let's face it, it's easy to be humbled at WPI. In fact, it's a huge factor when considering the value of a WPI education. Consistently being inspired and humbled by many of my classmates here has been a tremendous asset. But outside the security of campus, ego can create walls that deter understanding and keep us locked into our own ways of thinking. Humility breaks through the mental barriers we can place around learning and opens us up to possibilities and ideas we may have never considered. For IQP, our team built an anti-poverty mobile application for social service workers in Paraguay. We were all technical experts, well-versed in the field, creating a mobile app for people who had just recently started using smartphones. We were the experts, or so we thought. We interviewed 7 social service workers through an interpreter and a problematic Wi-Fi connection. At first, most of what we learned through these interviews we already knew. Then, we were punched in the gut. The last question of the interview was, if you could have any new technology in the world, what would it be? A social service worker named Liliana quickly replied, "A color printer." We were stunned to silence. We were humbled, and we were listening. Liliana explained how she and her peers took pride in the families they helped. They kept folders with before and after pictures, documenting each family's success in eliminating poverty, like new teeth and a new smile for the mother of one family, or a functional kitchen for another. They cherished these folders, and the black and white pictures just didn't tell the whole story. We went back to the drawing board. We forgot what we thought we knew about poverty and social service work in Paraguay. We learned that we weren't the experts. To make an impact, humility and listening require one additional step: real-world interaction. WPI's motto, theory and practice, couldn't be more appropriate when it comes to how the most important lessons are learned here. What we learn is temporary. What we do is forever. Much of our learning experience here was acquired through doing, practicing what we loved or didn't love, as opposed to merely sitting through seminars or reading from a book. Our learning was acquired through interaction, real work in and with the world around us. We didn't just come up with a fancy plan, turn it into a PowerPoint deck, and call it a day. We left the security of campus and took action in the real world. Taking action is scary, because once in a while, it turns out that the action is wrong. I'm guessing that your IQP or MQP did not end up exactly how you imagined it. I'm guessing that new feature did not work the first time you deployed it or the first time you user tested it. I'm guessing because mine sure didn't. But with humility, we acknowledged the failure. Through listening, we identified the causes. And with action, we tried again. And through the repetition of this cycle, humility, listening, and action, Through all of our projects and through all of our endeavors, we learned how to learn. Learning to learn is what we take with us from WPI. The invisible watermark, behind the words on our diploma. It's a vital tool we will carry into the rest of our lives, well worth the price we paid and the sacrifices we made. Learning to learn marks the true value of our time here, a skill not limited by our memory or our ability to recall facts. And now, we are not done learning. We've simply become better learners. Because learning to learn is our path to impact. This ultimately is why we learn to learn, not just for the heck of it, but to enact positive change throughout our local and global communities. So, let us continue to enact positive change. Let us continue to repeat this cycle, humility, listening, and action, throughout the rest of our lives. Let us continue to learn. Let us continue to make an impact. Thank you.
Hello. I'm honored to speak to you this evening on behalf of my peers in the WPI graduating class of 2019. Now, to get an idea of what I wanted this speech to be about, I did what any WPI student would do, and I made some estimates and crunched the numbers. And what I found was that over these past 4 years, my classmates and I have spent roughly 2,128,000 hours studying. We've also completed 1,500 internships and solved 5,600,000 lab, homework, test, and group project problems. There's no denying that we've worked hard, and we have all earned our spot here today. But as you all know, WPI students are more than just students. We've also spent 784,000 hours outside of our coursework doing what we love. We're writers, performers, and volunteers. We're roller skaters, video gamers, Rubik's Cubers, and athletes. We're world travelers, we're entrepreneurs, and we're leaders. All of this fueled by not quite enough sleep and 84,000 gallons of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Together, all these things are what make us the WPI graduating class of 2019. And while I know that we're all here to celebrate the title University Graduate, let's think about those numbers and think about how we all got to this point today. Within those 2 million or so hours that we collectively studied, we went to the library, made study guides, read through lecture notes, and went to faculty office hours. Sometimes we studied with our friends in the campus center, and other times we studied alone, late at night, only hours before an exam. Whatever way it was, if you think back to an individual moment, it probably seems pretty inconsequential. I want you to do this now. Think back to a completely random moment in the library where you're working on something related to your degree. When I do this, I think of drawing a simple free body diagram. Now, think back to a completely random part of any lecture. I think of when my professor used a capital omega and a lowercase omega in the same equation, and that's when they lost me. But the point is, although each one of these tasks may have seemed pretty small, together, all of these moments have led you to your undergraduate degree. Sociologist Dan Chambliss sums this up perfectly with the quote, "Greatness is doable." Greatness is many, many individual feats, and each of them is doable. When I read this, WPI students come to mind. Much like greatness, obtaining a degree is the product of many individual feats. When you first arrived on move-in day, that was an individual feat. When you studied for your first exam, and then the next day failed your first exam, that was an individual feat too. Alone, each one of them might have felt pretty insignificant. But now that you're here, I hope you can look upon those memories with pride and know that the combination of those individual feats has led you to right where you are now. Remember this throughout your career and throughout your life. Remember that each task, no matter how seemingly small, can help you to achieve whatever you put your mind to. Never underestimate the many things that you can and will accomplish. This mindset has also helped me through my own struggles that I faced earlier this year. This past fall, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to get my PhD in nuclear engineering. Except, the more I thought about it, the more confused and intimidated I felt. I knew that I wanted to get my PhD. The many applications of nuclear science are fascinating to me. But I just couldn't quite bring myself to apply. I was scared. I felt that my knowledge of nuclear physics was rudimentary at best. And the problem with this scenario wasn't that it was false. I was actually being quite realistic. My knowledge of nuclear physics was, in fact, introductory. The real issue was that I was caught up in the end picture. I was so focused on not knowing enough about the topic at that time that I was completely disregarding that I wasn't planning on actually finishing my PhD for another 5 years. So, when I finally realized that my thought process was entirely flawed, my solution was to think back to where I was in my life 5 years ago and to list off topics that I didn't know at that time. 5 years ago, I was wrapping up my junior year of high school. I knew the basics of 2D calculus, but not 3D. I knew where uranium was located on a periodic table, but I knew nothing of its radioactive properties. And, most importantly, I did not know any physics, any dynamics, what computer-aided design was, how to do the right-hand rule, or how to accurately pronounce Worcester. This did not mean that I would not be able to earn a degree in mechanical engineering. The only thing it meant was that I was yet to solve all of those problems. Truthfully, I still feel a little intimidated that I'll be starting graduate school this fall. I know it's going to be a lot of hard work, but I also know that as long as I take it one day and one small feat at a time, that it's nothing I can't handle. If I can impress one point upon all of you today, it would be to realize the sheer importance and beauty of small accomplishments. Every single skill that you have has come to you through practice and perseverance. If you're a computer science major, you didn't just wake up one day with the ability to code in 10 different languages employed by a Fortune 500 company. Or if you're an engineer, you were not born with the ability to design and analyze complex systems. You had to work at it, and you had to fail time and time again. And I'm sure these failures came in forms that many of us are all just a little too familiar with. An email with the phrase, "We regret to inform you." Your coding screen with a syntax error in red text. A grade on a test that makes you do a double take, and every other form of failure far and in between. But in spite of these small setbacks, we are all still accomplished students. Some with patents, startups, published research, and all with a pretty impressive resume. Each passing grade, completed project, job well done, and job offer was earned through our determination and efforts. And our efforts will not end today. We are now faced with the beginning of new unknowns and new possibilities. So, as a final note, I leave you with this. If you are one of the lucky few young adults that has yourself all figured out, I'm truly happy for you. And if not, if sometimes you find yourself feeling a little lost or unsure of the future, I'm happy for you too. For each moment that you are working, thinking, or just existing, you're one individual feet closer to figuring it all out and achieving your own versions of greatness. And that is an incredible thing. Class of 2019, I sure don't know where the time has gone these past few years, but I do know it was an honor to spend it with all of you. With all of my heart, thank you, WPI.
It is my pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker tonight. The senior class was so happy when Dean and Professor John McNeil accepted our invitation to be the special guest speaker this evening. John McNeil received his bachelor's degree from Dartmouth College, his master's of science from the University of Rochester, and his PhD from Boston University. From 1983 to 1990, he worked in industry in the design of high-speed, high-resolution analog-to-digital converters and low-noise interface electronics used in wide dynamic range imaging systems. In 1994, he joined WPI, where he now is Professor and Dean of Engineering. In 1999, he received WPI's award for outstanding teaching, and in 2007 was one of the inaugural winners of WPI's Exemplary Faculty Award. Please help me welcome John McNeil.
Thank you. President Leshin, Provost Sobayejo, trustees, faculty, members of the WPI community, family and friends, and most importantly, members of the great class of 2019, thank you for the honor of choosing me to share some inspirational reflections from my life on the eve of your graduation from WPI. I was hanging around a teaching lab in Atwater, Kent with some TAs and senior tutors waiting for the last students to finish up their lab work. We were talking, and someone says, "Hey, professor, why did you become a professor?" Now, my father was an electrical engineer, and my mother was a teacher, so it's not surprising that I ended up teaching electrical engineering. I wasn't exactly a bold trailblazer, but it goes back further than that. Not only did both of my parents go to college, all four of my grandparents went to college, which was very unusual in those days, and all four of them were teachers. So when I struggled in school and questioned if I'd made the right choices, I could reassure myself that I was following a path that my family had followed before me. To those of you who are the first in your families to go to college, or the first to pursue a STEM degree, you have all my respect for the strength of character you've shown to get here. When I struggled to understand something in school, and a professor cared enough to help me, that made me feel valued. When a professor shared the excitement I felt in mastering an important concept, that made me feel valued. When a professor listened to me and gave me advice to help me reach my goals, that made me feel valued. I hope those are experiences all of you have had here at WPI. That's why I became a professor, to help students feel valued the way I'd felt when I was a student. So, back to answering that question. Hey, professor, why did you become a professor? I have a very sarcastic sense of humor. So instead of what I just told you, I said, I think it's some sick power thing. I need to be around people who understand less about something than I do. I waited for them to laugh, but instead they all nodded like, now this all makes sense. Maybe it's not so clear why I became a professor, but it is clear to me that WPI has been tremendously fulfilling for these past 25 years I've been here, and I'm grateful to every one of you for making WPI such a great place to be today. Now, little memory test. Do you remember Dean Heinricher's 9 words? Go to class, do the work, ask for help. They're not just for WPI. The spirit behind these words will serve you well the rest of your life. First, go to class. The key word is go. Even if you don't have a clear vision of where you're going, getting moving is almost always better than sitting around waiting for the perfect opportunity. If you're worried because you don't know what will happen, or if you feel stuck, here's a tip. Think of as many options as you can, and then take a small step that will give you information about what to do next. You can't steer a parked car. Believe that something good can happen, and it will. Next, do the work. But what work are you going to do? People will always tell you to find your passion and follow your dreams, and I hope you are lucky enough to find work doing that. But whatever you end up doing, I can guarantee you there will be times when it is work. It won't feel rewarding. It will be difficult. It will be work. And that's okay. If it's a struggle from time to time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're on the wrong path. Successful people will often tell stories of persisting through difficulty. But be careful of the shadow side of persistence. Most people who succeed did so not by overcoming weakness, but by finding an opportunity that takes advantage of their strengths. Persistence is a virtue until persistence becomes a trap. If it's always a struggle, or if you find the culture in your workplace is toxic, get out. Some of the best decisions I ever made were quitting. Take the time to be mindful and reflective about your life. Don't let anyone else define success for you. And if you need to move on, move on. Which brings us to ask for help. It's okay to ask. It's human nature to ask for help. And people who will help you like to be asked. Why don't people ask for help? Do we overemphasize the need to appear strong and perfect? Social media. Here's a story about a time I asked for help. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 1983 and went to work as a design engineer at a Route 128 tech company. In 1990, after careful research and self-reflection, I chucked my career in industry and went back to grad school to get a PhD so I could be a professor. I moved to a university near my family's home in New York, where I'd found an advisor who was doing just the research I wanted to do in analog integrated circuit design. Things were great for the first semester until my advisor was fired. No one else in the department was doing research in my area. I was able to get a master's degree over the summer, but I had to find a new place to get my PhD fast. Boston University was just starting up their PhD program, so they took a chance on me. There was one professor doing analog ICs, Tony Mavretic. He connected me to Paul Brokaw, a giant in the field at Analog Devices, and I went up to see him on a Friday afternoon. Paul didn't have any research ideas open, but he encouraged me to go up and down the hallways with him to see if anyone needed a grad student. By this time, it was getting late. Most of the offices were empty, and I was starting to feel a little desperate. We stopped in at Larry DeVito's office, and Paul asked Larry if he had any research ideas. Larry looked at me and asked the question that would shape my career. Have you ever worked with phase-locked loops? I thought back to that one lab in college 8 years before where we had used phase-locked loops and said, yes. Yes, I am very familiar with phase-locked loops. Great, Larry said. Come back Monday and we can talk. I have something that might be interesting. So over the weekend, I read everything I had and everything I could find about phase-locked loops. so I could look like I really was familiar with them when I went back on Monday. Larry DeVito and I started a research collaboration that turned into my PhD, multiple IC designs that became commercial products, part of Larry's successful nomination for recognition as an Analog Devices Fellow, the basis of my NSF career grant, MS and PhD theses for students here at WPI, and eventually this book. A rewarding professional relationship still ongoing 30 years later, starting from a chance encounter on a Friday afternoon. What are some of the lessons I've taken away from this experience? 1, some people will tell you everything happens for a reason, but those people are wrong. Some things just happen. Certainly it's important to plan. There is value in strategic thinking, but things happen that you can't control, both challenges and opportunities. And it's so important to be flexible as events play out. 2, when you're in a desperate situation, don't beat yourself up for being there. Look for the positives. Know that other people who have been successful have gone through difficult times. Whatever happens, if you make a mistake, forgive yourself and move on. See everything as an opportunity for learning. 3, there's also a certain value to desperation. Because I was desperate and willing to do almost anything, I was able to get into research I wouldn't have done and develop in myself a capability I wouldn't have found. Looking back on this experience, I also learned the importance of gratitude. Gratitude for the help I had from others, from the teachers and colleagues who gave me their time and advice, and of course, the support I received from my family. Also, the importance of humility. Sure, I've worked hard, but things could have turned out very differently. If I hadn't had a healthy amount of good luck, I sometimes wonder where I would be now if Larry DeVito hadn't been in his office that Friday afternoon. Maybe things would have worked out, but maybe not. We've taught you to work hard and achieve, and we've tried to model that as professors. But don't let achievement lure you into the myth of meritocracy trap. There are lots of people who have worked just as hard as I did, or even harder, but they didn't get that lucky break. Or they didn't have the family background or support, or the good schools that I had growing up. Be grateful for the opportunities you've had, but watch out for the shadow side of gratitude, becoming complacent. Take the risk to be empathetic. The risk of empathy is that you will feel injustice to others more personally. When you see injustice and feel anger or sadness, let it motivate you to take action. As Margot Shetterly said at last year's commencement, people may try to tell you that you have to choose between doing your job and doing the right thing, but that's a false choice. Doing the right thing is always your job. So how does all this relate to your time here at WPI? The 7-week term teaches you to go, to be action-oriented and to work hard. The culture of teamwork teaches you to support each other, to ask for help and to give help. The unpredictable nature of open-ended projects teaches you to plan, but also to be flexible and resilient when things don't go according to plan. Your life will probably not be uniform progress from success to success, and that's okay. At WPI, we also say we're educating our students to be leaders. But what is leadership anyway? The best definition that I've heard is from the community organizer Marshall Gans, who defined leadership as taking responsibility to help others achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. That's the kind of leader I hope each of you will become. Some of you may be ready for that now. For some of you, that feeling of readiness may be years away. Some of you will seek out a leadership role. Some of you may, like me, have it asked of you. Whatever purpose you are trying to achieve, we hope that you will carry WPI's culture with you to make a positive impact in society. So on behalf of the entire faculty, staff, and administration, I thank you for your hard work and for making WPI a great place to be. We are so proud of you. You've done the work, and you're prepared for what's next. Go out there and bring theory, practice, and impact to a world that needs what you have to offer. Thank you.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel. River running free, you know how I feel. Blossom on the tree, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Dragonfly out in the sun, you know what I mean, don't you know? Butterflies all having fun, you know what I mean. Sleep in peace when day is done, that's what I mean. In this whole world is a new world and a bold world for me. Oh, for me. feel so good.
Well, we hope you have enjoyed tonight's program. We would especially like to thank John McNeil for participating in Baccalaureate tonight and sharing his thoughts and excellent advice. For not only the members of the class of 2019, but for all of us here tonight. On behalf of the class of 2019, I would also like to thank President Leschen, our trustees, Provost Sobrejo, and all the deans and faculty who have come to tonight's program. Thank you also to our family members and friends who have joined us here tonight. After our closing prayer, I would ask that the audience remain seated until the faculty and stage party has recessed from the tent, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Once again, join me in that spirit of prayer. From the east, may you bring home inspiration from all that you have learned. From the south, may you bring passion for what feeds your soul and feeds the world. From the west, may you bring the fruition of well-thought-out projects. And from the north, may you remember the solitude of Worcester winter. May you bring resilience. With all of these directions, surely you can find your way. Blessed be, amen, hallelujah, go forth.